thanks, everyone, for your great stamina. I know we stand between you and a well-deserved lunch as we set up, and I'll introduce the panel in a moment. We've gone through, a segment that was about breaking the pattern, and I think it's also maybe a moment now to sort of shift it, maybe think about how we're weaving a pattern, because in some ways the conversations, and we had such great presenters, and I learned quite a bit. It's really about how do we make the stories and the statistics and the sort of systems all come together. And I think it's an important framing, and we'll explore that in the panel. The stories are necessary because they inspire us to take action, because what we want is transformative change of the system. But I think the statistics are there too, because once we direct ourselves toward a particular course of action, we want to trust it. We want to trust these things, so we want to have the data that says, you know what, you've inspired us with the stories, and now the statistics back it up that we're in the right, we're in the right course. And so I hope that we're starting to see how they work together. It's not about coming here with an inspiring story or to sort of bring it back to reality around hard quantitative data, but to appreciate that there's an incredible relationship. And I think it's this community here that has to work together to make sure that the stories, the statistics do change and shape the system. The second bit I want to sort of frame the conversation and invite our panel on is, of course, we need measurement. This is about measuring progress. And probably many of you heard the quote, it's been often attributed to Peter Drucker, the management guru, but, if you don't measure something, you can't improve it, right? And I think there's a truism in that. But then there's an other side to it, and even Drucker himself realized that to have impact, certain things to have impact, you're not going to drive it through measurement. So there's things that measurement doesn't really drive progress around. And I want to remind the people here, because you're part of that, building relationships, creating mutual trust, right? Cultivating a community. That's not going to be done through measurement. So I want us to sort of park that. And so we can focus really about what we want to measure, why we measure it, the importance of getting it right, because actually having the wrong indices can do more harm than good. So with that, building off of Irene's presentation, I'd like to invite the panel up to join me. Irene, and then Shenggen Fan, who is the director of the International Food and Policy Research Institute in Washington, D.C. Luca, Virginio, who is the vice chair of the Bariliia Food and Nutrition Center. So we have a good cast to sort of explore this piece, this dynamic between, again, measurement and really the stories. And I'd like to start, if I can, because we just had the presentation by Irene on a fantastic indices. And by the way, it's great to see you again. We were colleagues many years ago, and she's really been focused on this issue. It's great to see it sort of shifting around in the food narrative. But Shenggen, maybe I could ask you. I mean, you're focused on policy research to really end hunger and malnutrition. What are the key indices that we need to be, or what should be on our dashboard with regard to this, and how can it actually complement or in a way actually help enhance other efforts similar to the one that Irene described?
Well, thank you, Lee. How many of you had your breakfast around 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock? I mean, we have not eaten for how many hours? 6 or 7 hours, right? Do you feel hungry? Well, you do. But don't forget, 800 million people are suffering from hunger right now. 800 million. It's only 6 or 7 hours for us. So my key message here is, number one is, whatever index measurement you have, we must focus on very hungry people, some of the countries that are struggling with famine and hunger. So the indexes are by the Economist, the intelligence unit, by my own organization, Global Hunger Index. So there are many indices. I don't think it is really a problem. I wanted to see more. But what we don't have is an index that can take into consideration of different aspects. So you're asking for a dashboard. What sort of indicators I really wish I wanted to see? Number one, yes, is hunger, is malnutrition. So make sure that our global food system is inclusive. So that system must benefit smallholders, benefit women, benefit young people. I think inclusiveness is the one, probably one we should emphasize more. The second is that system should also be sustainable. I think the sustainability index by you guys have done a good job. But there I wanted to see a bit more on the climate change side. Our agri-food system emits 20 to 30% of carbon emission. How can we really reshape our food system to mitigate the climate change? I'm afraid if we don't do it, we will miss the target of 2 degrees. Then another dimension is market and trade. So I think very often we miss that indicator in our dashboard. Trade must remain open. Trade must be transparent. Trade must benefit poor and hungry people. So I'm afraid, considering the current political situation in the US, in this part of the world, if we move towards the wrong direction, anti-trade, then the global food system will suffer. Many poor and hungry people will suffer. So how can we really have an indicator to measure that? Well, obviously, trade has to benefit poor and hungry people. Another dimension is the business friendly. I heard from the previous section that, towards the end of the day, it is the private sector that provides probably 80% and 90% of the food we eat today. If the private sector does not have an enabling environment, particularly policy environment, infrastructure, good regulation, so they will not have incentive to produce healthy, nutritious food for everybody. So this is just some of my sort of initial thinking on that. So working with other partners, including EAT Foundation, the World Bank, the Rubber Bank, and Indesa, the Wageningen Agricultural University, we try to come up with some ideas, some sort of initial thinking, how we can really bring these different dimensions together to really make sure that we can track, monitor the progress of the global food system we wanted to see in the future.
Shenggen, just picking on your point, I think it's clear that indices, by their nature, are really sort of a simplification of something very complex. In this case, the food system. And some people are very comfortable with data. Others are more visual oriented. Most of us sort of understand it through narrative and stories. And I want to turn to Luca because earlier in Irene was mentioned really in the framing of the indicators was the role of the Milan Protocol, Milan Charter, and how it led to these indices. But how do you first, tell us your experience about how you frame a complex issue, because that's where it starts. Yeah. In terms of before we get to the indice, that measure tries to sort of in a way simplify the complexity.
Yeah. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, and hello to everybody. It all belongs with the Milan Expo that this morning the Mayor Sala mentioned. We thought that the Milan Expo was a great opportunity to give an answer to the challenges that we are talking all the time and since a couple of years. But soon the Bariliia Foundation, saw that there was and there is still not one single piece of policy making bringing all together the challenges that we are talking about. I will not remind them because we mentioned many times. So our proposal was a very simple one, was to bring together in a single policy document the challenges, the food and nutrition and planet resources challenges in one policy document in a very simple way, because guys, we know the story. And then in the same policy documents, we set very clear targets to be achieved. The targets that we are discussing, and some of them have been already decided in important institutions at European or US level or whatever you want. And then we provided some guidance for political leaders and business leaders, not only political leaders, but also political leaders, to engage with and to sign the document. So that was the legacy, the policy document for the Universal Expo. That document then became the policy document of the Expo. It was handed over to Ban Ki-moon as one of the many papers that are contained in the important buildings. And we believe that that was a great contribution because in a very simple way, made loud and clear the most urgent and compelling issues that we are all facing, whatever and whoever we are. But at that moment, then Lee, we also realized that, you know, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit cynic, and forgive me, but you know, we have to treat these issues as it was and as it is a business game. And in business, if you are just talking about pleasure or ideas, you don't go so far, okay? So very soon you will collapse. You need to understand what the situation is on the market, and you need to set clear goals, and you need to have the tools to measure, you know, the goals that you set for yourself. And sorry to say that, but at this world, we realize that there is a lot of things, but at the same time, there is nothing about data and how to track progress on goals. And so that is when the work with Economist started. And so, and I think that that was a fantastic tool, because if you combine, you know, the issues that we call the stories, by the way, summarized in a simple, compelling way, with, you know, a tools that helps everybody, decision makers, being public or private leaders, to track the progress, then you have a wonderful tool, you know, to make, you know, progress on the challenges that we are all keeping talking all the time. So that is, in a very simple way, the story that we set, and also how we set the work that we have in front of us.
So, Luca, you used the word tool just now, these indices being tools. And, you know, and Irene, you mentioned that indicators can ensure better coordination and consistency between certain policies, between national governments, and a good benchmarking in a tool. You know, I come from Switzerland, so when we say tool, we think of the Swiss Army knife, and there's like lots of functions, right? But we know that some of them are more, there's a lot of functionality, but the usability of some of them are questionable, but there's a few that you really know you go to when you have your Swiss Army knife, Swiss pocket knife. In terms of the indicators that are linked to policies, they don't explain really how or whether they're being implemented. But when you say they're a tool, what's the one thing you'd want a policymaker to do with your indicator in terms of really applying it as a tool? What's the one thing you'd want?
I think it's really using the index as a tool, because sometimes, you know, we know both, because I mean, I worked for many years at the World Economic Forum on indexes. The first thing, you know, in the index come out, and obviously governments are either upset or very happy, and then they focus on the number, but the number is not important. I think what is important is under the number, and really look at a different, it's actually a different recipe or a different priority according to your score, but in a way, it's really a way, it's a roadmap. So basically, you look at the indicator, you see indicators you are interested in improving, and then you use it as a way to track your progress against the rest of the sample. So I think that's what it is. It's really not the numbers, it's the power it gives you to actually change and see where you should move. So yeah, I mean, I think it's important, because obviously the index is always like people tend to focus on the score. And again, as you said, the index is a simplification of a reality. There are many ways to simplify the reality. So there isn't a single index which is, to your point, inclusive of everything. You know, there are different ways, a way of simplify the reality according to a certain way to look at the world. So it has to be taken like that. It has to be maybe use different indexes. Pick and choose, use what you think it's best.
So in a way, I mean, we'll take that statistics, we'll create a score, but it's actually those of us in the room to sort of craft a story around it to compel the change. We just sort of can't hammer where we are in the scoring, but it's really about what's the story that's unique to that position, that relative position.
Definitely.
One little caveat, I see you can see the screen. We don't have as much time as it seems because we sort of run over. So I'd like to, and I talked to you backstage about reflecting on things. If there was, you know, when we look at indices, we recognize you know, they're macro tools, right, of measuring progress. But for those of us, I think, here in the community, we'd love to know, are there micro steps to really move the indicator? I mean, can we do something at the micro level that actually has that macro impact in those things? And if you do, can you share them with us, or at least suggest one or two? Because I think that is going to be really something where we can feel that we can at least not just sort of be witness and actually endorse these indices, but at least go back to our institutions to consider what small steps, even as individuals, that we can actually in the aggregate help move the needle. So I'd love to, in your thoughts or guidance on that before we close the session. Luca, did you want to try that?
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Lee. And my answer is the following. My concern is that we created the index, which we believe is fantastic. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. But at the same time, let's not take or let's not invent another tool to delay the answer to the problems. And I think that we all know which are the problems. We all know which are the problems. We all know also which are the solution and how to provide the answer to the solution. I think that yesterday Princess Victoria made a very clear and very powerful point. The answer to most of the dilemmas that we saw today are in the hands of the human being, of the normal people. And if you allow me, the consumers. Because when the people decide, they vote. Okay? And depending on how they vote, it depends their well-being and the well-being of the planet. That's very important. But, there is a big but. There is a gap of trust and authenticity. Because obviously people, to make informed choices when they vote, they need to know the story. They need to know exactly what to vote. And here is the problem about public and political leaders and business leaders. Because it's a problem of trust, and we are losing the trust. Because if we talk about the political leaders, guys, without mentioning any name, because that was the rule of the game, obviously we still have political leaders, very important one, that deny the evidence. And obviously, people then lose the trust in the political institution, the political leaders. But if we want to talk about ourselves, and I'm a business leader at the same time, I think that we have a huge responsibility as business leaders, because we know exactly what it takes to change the rule of the game. And we have also the solution in our hands. It's just a matter of deciding how fast or how slow we want to be. And we have big responsibility in the way we do business. Let me make quickly, a couple of examples, if you don't mind. So we cannot, talk about the issues that we are talking about, and there are many business leaders in this room, but at the same time, continue to serve the same products to the people, without reducing the portion of our products, We talk about the importance of water, for feeding the people, but at the same time we replace water with other products. I don't want to name the products, and we don't inform properly the consumers. We don't educate properly the consumers. So we delay the answer to the problem that we know and we have already the solution. So we have a problem of trust and authenticity. That's it. So that is my call to action. Guys, let's change the way we interact in the market and we interact with the people. The power is in the hands of the people, but let's enable the people to make the right choices. So that's my suggestion.
Well, thanks, Luca. I think you make a very good point. If I read into that also, value is volume is not value here. Right?
Absolutely.
Right? We have to redefine what value is for the consumer, and that's what business can do. And that's what we all can do in sort of bringing that narrative.
And let's talk about value food and non-volume of food. Let's start to talk about the value food.
Shenggen, what's the one thing we could do to move that big needle?
Sure. Well, firstly, I think the global food system is complex, but there's no excuse not to do anything. I think somebody mentioned that in the previous speaking. So I think this index itself is not an end. It's a process. It's a process where we can really compare who is doing better than others in which area, then we can really take some actions. I can see at least probably 3 or 4 different types of action. One is a policy. You said, how can we really move the needle? I think the policy is an issue. We do not have a food security. We have the policy issue. We failed in policy. And lots of policies still continue to subsidize unhealthy food production at the cost of more nutritious healthy food. $500 billion are used to subsidize fertilizers, water, electricity to produce empty calorie. at the cost of more nutritious foods like fruits, vegetables, and so on. So we must change that. Second, innovations. I think I'm so excited to hear about the innovations presented in previous speakers. I think we got to reshape our global agriculture research system to innovate certain technologies that can deliver multiple wins. Nutrition, sustainability, climate resilience. I think we do have certain technologies that can meet multiple wins. And a behavior change, yes, I very much agree with that. So we got to change our behavior from, so if we have a chart to look at the different foods, their carbon footprint, their nutrition, or even their inclusiveness, and I can use that card to guide my shopping or guide my consumption. I mean, that would be a very useful tool.
And I think, you mentioned the earlier discussants and panelists. I mean, they've inspired us with their stories. I think we know that really that future is very real. They're already part of it. We hope through your indices and other efforts, we'll build that trust in the direction that they're pointing to, and through the evidence, through the measurements, we can actually add wind to their sails. So thank you very much for your panel. Thank you all for your patience, and bon appetit.
Yeah.